only once you give yourself permission not to try and do it all, to be thoughtful and selective about the most valuable, most useful, most important work in life, will you start to make progress on those things that matter most to you.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now Show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
Greg McKeown is on the show today, and this is a pinch me moment because Greg is the author of one of my all-time favorite books, probably the book that I've gifted the most, and that is Essentialism. So Essentialism really helps us understand what's important and how we can spend our time doing what's important. I'm not sure there's anything more important than figuring that out and continuing to make progress with our relationship with time. So as I guide female entrepreneurs and work with people to help them do the difficult things in life, to help them navigate those black diamond mountains, one of the first things I do is hand them this book, Essentialism. Because if we don't have a healthy relationship with time, then we really don't have anything at all. There isn't room to tackle that big black diamond why not now idea. We have to be able to continue to make progress with this concept over time because it is the ultimate currency. Now, an essentialist believes that almost everything is non-essential, and a non-essentialist believes that almost everything is essential. So this concept of essentialism is really helpful in figuring out what is your priority, not just in life in general, but at any given moment. What is the priority right now? I think one of the reasons I'm so drawn to the concept of essentialism is that I suffer from shiny object syndrome at times. And there are moments where we all feel like we are going a millimeter in a million different directions. So Greg and I talk through how to avoid that. And he shares his start, how he got started. He was confronted with the question, which was, what would I do if I could do anything? This was years ago, and it was a very inconvenient time to be doing this as he was navigating his path to becoming an attorney. And so that question sparked a whole new trajectory for him. I can't speak highly enough about Greg. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I took probably 3-4 pages of notes. So get your pencil out or pen or however you like to take notes. Clearly, I'm a little old school. And get ready. Enjoy. Being able to design my own day and do it in the most efficient way is a non-negotiable for me. I'm a bit of a time management nerd, so when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and effective to get the most out of my day, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and it's called Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized professionally and personally. And my to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And My team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. We are in lockstep. Monday.com is like having a brand new operating system. Everything has its own home, deadline. You can see the team members associated with the tasks, and it's color coordinated, so you can easily navigate your own task list. We all have multifaceted jobs, businesses, and lives. With Monday, you're able to keep all of these components organized in their own compartments, but you're also one click away from seeing the big picture and how they all integrate together. Creating systems and procedures within your day and business saves a lot of time. For example, my team and I have a dedicated Monday.com board for this very podcast. Did you know that there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast ready for air? It's the same exact process every single time. And it's a system that we have put into place. So we know the various key steps are assigned to certain people, and we've mapped out the entire process from start to finish within this one board. This allows us to be streamlined. It cuts back on the amount of emails exchanged as well as the amount of meetings needed. One feature I love is that my social media content calendar is built inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, I like, and it's embedded into my overall calendar as well. Another feature we use every single day is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer, which is extremely distracting and inefficient. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin to start your free trial today. That's hey.monday.com/Amy Jo Martin. Greg, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today.
It's so great to be with you.
Let's kick things off in the spirit of why not now. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, and really kind of dive in to how you got from idea to action.
Well, that question brings me straight back to a moment almost 20 years ago when I was staring at a piece of paper in my hands that I'd been writing on for the last 20 minutes. I'd been brainstorming the question, what would you do if you could do anything? And I was visiting the United States from England, and what struck me wasn't what I'd written down. It wasn't all the answers for what I would do if I could do anything. It was what I hadn't written down. I suddenly realized that law school was not on my list, which was a tad inconvenient because I was at the time at law school. And so I had to face, well, why are you still doing that? Could you quit? Could you do something different? And if you could, why not now?
Well, so this happened in a matter of you're writing for 20 minutes and then you realized this. And was it that profound? Did you feel like this was brewing, or was this just kind of a big aha, how did I get here type of moment?
I had been straddling two different pursuits. I've been studying law, at law school, studying law in the UK, but also interested and deeply passionate about teaching and writing, particularly in the field of leadership and strategy. And so with that as context, I had gone to see a gentleman who ran an educational department, and I was sharing some ideas I had for teaching and writing. And he said, well, look, if you do decide to stay in America, then you should come and help us with this consultation committee. And that question put with the embedded assumption that you could just do something different. Well, if you do decide that, you should come and help us. It was the spark for the brainstorm. What if I mean, I think most of us, and myself included at that time, know at some intellectual level that we have choices, that we could do something different, that logically it's theoretically possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I think emotionally it isn't always possible. We or at least we feel that it isn't a choice. And so therefore, in all practical ways, it's not a choice. And in this moment, it felt possible. And so, as Joseph Conrad talks about in Heart of Darkness, I was able to put one foot over the edge and feel what that would be like for a moment. And that started to open up it went from being just a possibility to being something I would want to do, to something in a very short period of time that I couldn't imagine going back to life before the thought that actually I wasn't going to be able to put my life back into its original packaging. Mm-hmm. The thought was so liberating. This alternative path felt so right, so confirming that it launched me on a totally different journey.
Amazing. It sounds like a definite kind of line in the sand moment. And what would you do if you could do anything? It's such a epic question, but it seems it was really prompted by just a hint of someone else saying, well, if you decide to do this, then you should come and do this. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, actually, I have a lot of options here. So backing up just a little bit, or actually, I guess in your timeline, probably fast forwarding, Essentialism is probably my number one book I've gifted in my life, I would say. That and Man's Search for Meaning, probably. And it's something that I just have such an affinity to, because I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs, and my number one fundamental hope for them is that they're able to have a healthy relationship with time and at least understand how powerful and number one that needs to be. So if you fast forward that moment when you asked yourself, what would I do if I could do anything? And you ended up eventually writing Essentialism. Was it 2014-ish, 13, 14? What happened in the interim? How did you, clearly at some point you started to pursue leadership, strategy, writing, teaching. What did that look like in the tactics?
Immediately following this eureka, I had the rather obvious thought that I ought to call my parents. So that was like the very next step. I called England, and my mother answered, fortunately, you know what I mean? And she listened for a while. She said, I think you better talk to Dad.
Heard that one.
And so he comes on the phone and he listens, which isn't entirely like him. And then he became quite Churchillian about the whole thing. Son, you know what we've always told you. And then, because all Englishmen quote Shakespeare over tea and crumpets for breakfast in the morning, he pulls a line straight out of Hamlet. This above all, for thine own self be true. Ooh. That's what we've always told you. Always. He'd never said that to me in his whole life.
Thanks, Dad.
But he pulled it up in the right moment. And so really, this was certainly in hindsight, this was when I, for want of a better term, this is when I realized, look, I can be a messenger in my own small way to my own, within my own sphere of influence. But I wasn't sure at that time what the message was, but I just felt like I needed to teach and write. And so lots of learning that needed to go into that, masses of it, non-stop pursuit after that for years and years of research, writing. I went back and did a journalism undergraduate at BYU and then later graduate work at Stanford. And all the while really saying, okay, well, if your job is to teach and write, fine. That's sort of, that's, as I say, being a messenger. But what's the message? What is it? What is it that you are feel driven to teach. And that was an iterative process. I mean, I found many principles within leadership and strategy to be interesting and wanted to teach them and did teach them in a variety of settings. But then I had a second experience, a second why not now moment, if you like. And I didn't really fully realize it at that moment, but in hindsight, when I got an email from my colleague at the time that said, Friday between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. I mean, my wife was expecting, otherwise there's an even stranger email to receive. Mm-hmm. But sure enough, Thursday night is when we go into the hospital. Our daughter's born. Friday morning, we're in the hospital. Everybody's as well as can be expected after having gone through the valley of the shadow of death the night before. And I'm feeling torn. How can I keep everybody happy? How can I get to this meeting? How can I make sure that Anna's okay, her daughter's okay, that everything's all right? And to my shame, I went to the meeting. And afterwards, I remember a colleague said, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made. And the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of confidence to me. But even if they had, it was clear then, and it's especially clear with any hindsight, that I'd made a fool's bargain. And what I learned personally was, if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And that was really the moment in which I said, okay, so this is the message. This deserves specific, unique research to understand why it is that we say yes to something less important instead of saying, and saying no to something more important, as I did in that instance. And along the way, I learned many things, but one of the things I learned is that it's an almost universal problem, that it is not unique to me. Maybe no one's pulled a McKeown in the hospital room moment as I did, but I think many people listening to this will relate to the feeling of tension between competing activities and that sensation we have when we say yes to something that's less important. And so people can test this themselves right now by, here are a few questions for our consideration. Have you ever found yourself, like I was, feeling stretched too thin at work or at home? Have you ever found yourself like I was, feeling busy but not necessarily productive? Do you often feel that your day is being hijacked by other people's agenda for you? If the answer to those questions is yes, and I found that it is for a very great percentage of the population, then what essentialism is, what the book I wrote is intended to do, is to provide a way out of the sort of madness that has become normalized for a lot of people.
And there are so many. I remember your story too about, having to make that decision about being in the meeting and having just gone through one of life's biggest moments and having a child and all of these, that story. And it resonated so deeply, with me, as it will with many other people. I think one of my questions for you is, how can people be a better judge of their own capacity before they get to that point? Sometimes we just have to learn, but I think I see it over and over again, and with myself and others, we just think we have more capacity than we do and end up going a millimeter in a million directions, as you say in the book. So asking yourself those questions is kind of like a bit of a filter, but how can we become a better judge of what can fit on our plate that matters?
There's one reason that I found in my research that people say yes to too much, too easily without thinking about it is called the planning fallacy. It's a brain heuristic, which means it's a default way that we're oriented as humans towards decision making. And the planning fallacy means specifically is one that we underestimate the amount of time it will take to do a thing. Mm-hmm. And we do that really consistently. That's nobody should feel bad about that. If they're hearing this, oh, yes, I'm guilty of that. Yeah, of course you are. You're a human. You're going to be guilty of this. So there's not so much you can do to rewire that tendency, but you can adapt knowing that that's a tendency. And the one concrete way to adapt is to be able to take whatever time estimate you think. So somebody says, oh, you have an idea, or someone says to you, hey, here's something that you could do. And at first you think, oh, this is a piece of cake. I can do this in, think about how long it will take you. Okay, I could do this in half an hour. And then I think you need to multiply that by some, amount of time. I think the minimum we ought to add is like an extra 50% to any time estimate. That's like the minimum. I once talked to a CEO who said that they'd learned they needed to take any time or budget estimate and multiply it by pi.
Triple.
And I thought they were exaggerating at that time, but I've come to find that really is, that does feel about right. And so that's the range. So just start recognizing, oh, I've got to allow more time. You say, okay, I'm going to drive from here to, I'll drive from point A to point B, pick someone up, go to an appointment. And you say, oh, I'll do it in 10 minutes. Yeah, but just pause and go, no, it's not 10 minutes. 10 minutes is the fastest humanly possible time you've ever made that trip in. There's bound to be something that comes up. So you've got to at least do 15 minutes. That's the minimum adjustment. But then really, there isn't anything so wrong with saying half an hour to such a time estimate, because then you get there a little early. And in that earliness, in a little bit of breathing space, you're adding buffer into your life. And what that gives you back is space to think, to breathe, to be there. And that's space that almost never exists now, because we're always just rushing. And our life is this perpetual race, sometimes to nowhere. We're just racing from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And it's not even really, we know why we're rushing so fast. But the rush is self-perpetuating. And so it can be that we miss a lot of joy along the way, miss a lot of the experiences of life along the way, because we're just in this mode to rush. So I think that's one concrete thing people can do, is to adjust to this planning fallacy by multiplying every time estimate, either by minimum 50% and maybe maximum, by pi.
Yeah. Wow. And just one of the fundamentals in your book, Essentialism, and how you talk about essentialists think almost everything is non-essential, and then the opposite for non-essentialists. How do you guide or coach people? I mean, you've worked with clients, just some of the biggest brands in the world, and these executives. How do you help them remain open, have an open mind, and not get too carried away with, like shiny object syndrome, but also focused on what's essential? Like, are there any, how do you kind of give them those guardrails, or do you?
Well, I think that the case must be made first. The value proposition of essentialism and the costs associated with its opposite must be made first. The opposite is non-essentialism, to give this a name. So non-essentialism is an idea. You hinted at it already, this idea that everything is essential. If everything's essential, then life is like living at a coal mine. Our job is just to get as much stuff out of, from point A to point B. It's all important. So I'm just going to try, as I said before, rush, go get all of this out. And the promise of non-essentialism is that if you rush all the time, if you try and do everything, everything perfect now, if you try then you will somehow, because of that immense effort and strain and stress, you will get the life you want. You will get everything you want in life. You'll get the meaningful relationships. You'll get the success in your career pursuits. You'll have happiness in your life and joy. I mean, that's the value proposition of non-essentialism. And basically, what I have to say about that is two things. One is, if that's working for you, just keep doing it. If it's working, if it's giving what it promises, ignore everything I'm saying. Maybe even double down on it. Sleep even less. Don't sleep at all. Say yes to everything that anyone else is doing and try to do it all perfectly. If it's working, if it works, keep doing it. And the second thing I have to say about it is that what I have learned from personal experience, but also now from working with a good number of people, is that turns out not to actually work. Non-essentialism turns out inconveniently to be a lie, and we've been sold a bill of goods, told and sold for a great period of time now that this will work, and it doesn't work. And so then you say, okay, well, then what's the promise of essentialism? Essentialism's argument is simple. It says, look, only once you give yourself permission not to try and do it all, to be thoughtful and selective about the most valuable, most useful, most important work in life, will you start to make progress on those things that matter most to you, and then have the satisfaction of getting the right things done, having greater joy in the journey because you're not just spread so thin, rushing to and fro without really a direction in mind. And so you get more joy and satisfaction in the journey as well. But that's the value proposition of both sides. If somebody can come to reject non-essentialism, the logic of non-essentialism, the illogic of it, and come to embrace the logic and mindset of an essentialist, really the argument is now made. There's no organ rejection after that. And I found that people, especially people who will be listening today, driven, capable, curious people that have bought into this way of living, this non-essential way of living, are actually eager to be persuaded that there's an alternative, and they want to make a change because they recognize that what got them here won't get them to there. That the things that help them to be successful in the first place are actually the same kinds of things that are going to keep them plateaued in their current level. And so they need to find a new alternative approach to be able to break through to the next level of contribution, success, and happiness in their lives. And so once you have the case made, people are now really, the position is, well, okay, can it be done? I want that. There's no longer a desire problem. I want that. I want to be more successful with less stress. I want to accomplish more by doing fewer things. This is compelling argument. So now the question is it really possible? And to me, that then is the journey with people, is to start working on small things they can do that will actually start to deliver this different kind of life.
And would you say that, back to your example with, it taking, let's say, 10 minutes to get from point A to B, but you need to at least budget 15, if not 3 times the amount. Would you say that, as you're working with executives and helping them lean more toward essentialism, any kind of white space that they're able to build into their day or just unscheduled time, does it end up being more of an asset because they're able to think more proactively versus reactively, or be more on the offense versus defense? Do you encourage them to have not a lot, but a portion of blankness in their day? Okay.
Yes. But not only do I encourage it, it grows quite spontaneously out of a clear understanding of essentialism versus non-essentialism. If you understand that, to use the metaphor I used a moment ago about shoveling coal, if you discover that is a con, that actually will not deliver what it's promised, if you suddenly discover that reality is much more closely aligned to the metaphor of being in a diamond mine, let's say, suddenly your whole orientation to life changes. Your whole pursuit changes. The game changes, because you say, well, look, the world isn't full of everything being equally essential and important. Life actually is full of very few really essential things, and most of the rest of it is noise. It's the trivial many versus the vital few. And so it really is, in the first place, a mindset change that needs to take place. And as that mindset shifts, if you really are in a diamond mine and you know nothing else, you would start, I'm not in a coal mine. I don't have to get as much of this stuff out as possible. My job is to find the diamonds. It creates a completely different orientation towards life. You say, well, I'm not going to just try and do as many things on a to-do list as I possibly can today. I'm not going to try and get through my emails as fast as I possibly can, as many times as check all day long. This is not the approach. The goal is, how can I pause, reflect, and think, well, what is essential? If there's only a few things that are vital, well, I need to pause to find out what they are. And so suddenly the math changes. So in my own life, a concrete example is I spend an hour, maybe as many as 2 hours on a Sunday, going through my week. I have a very clear design process I go through, designing my week, checking in on the things that are most important and how I'm doing with them. And that is obviously time well spent to me from an essentialist logic. Of course you'd spend that time to try and work out, because that 1 to 2 hours of reflection and thought and prioritization makes every other hour of the 168 hours in a week more valuable, more aligned, more thoughtfully used. There's a very high leverage thing to do. And what makes it high leverage is the reality that we live in, which is that the world is full of only a few really essential things. If everything was all actually almost equally important, then it didn't just shovel coal. I mean, it's fine. Just get as much of it over as possible. If that's really if that's reality, as I've said before, then you just keep doing that. But as soon as people pause and think about this, they realize, no, there's so much stuff that's worth nothing.
Yeah.
There's so much stuff that's just noise. And as they apply this, they find over time they can find more and more valuable things to give their energy and time to, and they can keep getting rid of some of the lower value activities.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. One of the things that I love that you talk about, and I watched your Google Talks video online about priorities versus priority and just the origin of the word. It wasn't plural when it was created. And now, we refer to priorities all the time, especially in the corporate world, and we have our top 9 priorities or however many. Would you say that as you're coaching and guiding people, no, you have one priority, or can you have 2? Can you have 3?
Well, let's just reflect a little on that word priority. It came into the English language 1400s. According to Peter Drucker, it stayed singular for 500 years. It meant the first thing, the very first thing, the most prior thing. And as you rightly say, it wasn't until the 1900s that it was pluralized, and so in some ways one can struggle to understand what that word really means. Can you have very, very many before all other things? Things, and so it isn't so much that I'm saying, when I think about that word, that I'm saying, look, you can only do one thing in your whole life. No, that's neither realistic nor true, nor that doesn't even seem to be the point of the word priority. It's just, certainly I think you can apply that word directly in this way. You can say, well, look, what is the priority now?
Now.
What's important now? Yeah, because we can multitask. That is, clearly true. But what we can't do is multi-focus. And as soon as in fact, I've done it myself. I've been, washing up something in the kitchen and in the sink, and I'm talking to somebody on the phone. I'm multitasking, and then the person that you're speaking to says something interesting, something that grabs your attention. And without meaning to, you stop washing up. Oh, hold on. What did they say? And why did they say that? I can't believe they said that. It's an evidence that you can't multi-focus. And so the goal of, or a test of essentialism, let us say it that way. A test of essentialism is, can you answer the question, what's important now? What's the priority now? And that's a good question to ask, consistently every so often through the day, to check in with that question, what's important now? But ideally, what we really want is over time to build a system into our lives, a routine that has already answered that question ahead of time, so that we don't have to use up a lot of our cognitive resources to just continually ask that question, well, what's important now? Gotcha. 5 minutes later, well, what's important now? And so on. But if you can answer, it's still a great test. Can you answer the question, what's important now? And if you can't, then I think that what's really important right now is to figure out what's important right now and to build a system to help you live those things more. So you have the satisfaction of giving your limited precious time to the things that are of greatest value.
That makes sense. And so I read that you have 4 children. And do you have any examples of how you practice essentialism at home?
I mean, I think it's a great question. In some ways, essentialism was learned at home. I don't think it's a stretch at all to apply it there. But I'll give one example to my mind. I was just doing a keynote, and that was one of the questions they asked: how do you apply essentialism at home? And it brought back to mind one of the experiments my wife and I started a few years ago. We'd read this idea about it's a mechanism for how you can make the trade-off with your children of less screen time for more reading time. And that's a perfect example of essentialism, in practice. We want our children in our family. We want our children, I think a lot of other people do, more reading time, less gadget play. So here's how the system works. We created a McKeown currency. It was 10 tokens, and each child got 10 tokens. Each token had value. If I recall correctly, each token was worth 50 cents or half an hour screen time. If by the end of the week you didn't use any, then you had $5. If you used 5 hours of television screen time, then you didn't get paid. But then here's the extra part of it, is that you could earn an extra token for every half an hour of books that you read. What that did in practice was it really encouraged reading, because your incentives are high. You for every half an hour you're reading, you get a token. You can use more screen time as you see fit. It also means if you don't use the screen time, you get paid more. So it's incentivizing the behavior that we want. The second benefit of it is that the management of the whole system was more on the children and less on us. We still had a role to play, as with any delegation. You don't take it entirely off your list. You're still managing it to some extent. But it was far easier to monitor than checking up all the time. They haven't snuck on the TV here. They haven't, they were responsible for managing the process. And what we found in practice was this huge increase of reading and a huge decrease in screen time. And what we did it for a whole summer, and it was when 2 of our children were too young to really participate in it, but it began an ongoing reading renaissance in our culture, our family culture. And so I was on vacation recently, and we were waiting to pick up the rental car, something like that, and all 4 children were sat reading while we were in this long line. And the only reason I noticed that, and
no currency involved.
No currency involved now.
Nice.
Because it's become part of the culture. And the only reason I noticed is because somebody in front of us in the line turned around and talked and commented about it to us, to my wife and I. And so I sort of had to look and go, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's not unusual for that to be the case. And so they have come to love reading, and actually it's funny, it's come full circle now, because nobody likes a book pusher, do they? But all my children are book pushers with me now. It's come full circle. Oh, Dad, you've got to read that book. But I mean, of all the problems they have, this is the one you want. So
that's great.
I mean, that's an illustration. It's an illustration.
Yeah, and the trade-off concept is becoming just another layer of learning and application that they can apply to, to their lives too, just conceptually. It's amazing. And speaking of screen time, one of my questions for you, Greg, was social media. And is it just a huge clash with essentialism, period? How do you, let's just talk a little bit about social media in general. I know myself, and having the screen time app and feature on my phone, it can be very sobering to see how much time gets spent on that. But what are your thoughts? And I've noticed, you obviously have a social media presence, but it doesn't appear that you're spending a ton of time, in there. So I'd just love to hear your thoughts around this in general, because it's such a cultural, huge component to our day-to-day.
My wife, Anna, has introduced a question in our home. So this bridges the last question, the question before the last, and then this question. And this is what she has introduced, is after you've been on whatever screen, is just to pause and ask the question, did that serve me, or did that master me? What was that experience? Was it I went on there, I was looking for something useful, I found something useful, and so it served me, or did I serve it? And that to me goes to the heart of the matter here. I personally don't imagine we will ever put technology back into its, we're not going to put that genie back in the bottle. And for my sake, I wouldn't want to. I'm not a Luddite in my thinking, but I certainly think that we need to, in our own lives, shift the control function. Because what I mean is this: right now, the default settings, both the literal but also metaphorical default settings in social media and in technology in general, is in favor of the producers of that technology. I mean,
the platforms, like the algorithms,
everything. The fact that you and I and almost everybody listening to this have a supercomputer in our pockets. The fact that for most people everywhere they go they have it. All of that has been that didn't happen spontaneously. That isn't the natural state of things. That has happened through hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in technology platforms, in personal computing platforms, in the design of gadgets, in the absolute deliberate strategic studying of human behavior, habit formation, addiction. I mean, all of this has been done to make social media and all of the related tools as addictive as possible, so that it's easy to use and hard not to use. I don't think I'm saying anything remotely controversial in saying that. Mm-hmm. That is self-evident. But all of that means that the system in our lives is defaulted in that direction. And so what I want to do in my life is I want to make sure that the essential things in my life are as easy to do as possible, and the non-essential things are as hard to do as possible. That's the shift I want to make. So technology can be a tool to be utilized, but it needs to serve the goals that I think are important in my life, not the goals that somebody sitting in Cupertino or elsewhere in Silicon Valley, is prioritizing.
And how do you? And maybe I mean, you probably don't have to work at this, but for those who do, if the goal is to make the essential things in your life as easy as possible and the non-essential as hard, how would you suggest someone potentially makes non-essential time spent using social media more hard? Like, is it literally remove the app from your phone, just blocking and tackling types of things like that, or stop?
It depends on the situation. But I was working with somebody recently who admitted to me that he was spending, I think what he said is between 18 and 20 hours a week on Instagram. It was so he had as a part-time job. He has a part-time job checking Instagram.
Good point.
And he actually has a full-time job. He's started a bakery, and he easily rationalized being on Instagram because that's where I get some ideas from Instagram about what I can do to develop my bakery beyond where it is right now. And so it was easy for that to do. But when I pushed on, like, okay, well, what's really productive time and what's not, he concluded that we were talking less than an hour a week was really productive time. So this is a huge portion of his productive life, or potentially productive life, that he's spending on doing activity that is not helping him, is actually keeping him from the real business he wants to pursue, and is making him feel worse about himself as he compares himself, to other people. So we came up with quite an in-depth process. And the principle is to put a speed bump between you and the non-essential activity of choice. And so for him, he gave his password away to someone who would monitor it for him. So he literally had no access. If he wanted to post something, he asked them to post something, and they would post something for him. And so he got a rebate. Imagine, think about how many people feel they do not have time in their lives for the things that matter, feel stretched too thin, and so on. The kind of time rebate, if you get 20 hours suddenly back. And so it was quite an easy fix. He just couldn't access it anymore. He didn't have a password.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead, he was able to take all that time and start building a business plan, which he hadn't done before. And I helped him with that a little bit. And so he just made all this reinvestment in something that mattered a lot more to him. And so, that's an illustration. There's many things we can do. And what I've learned is they don't have to be complicated speed bumps, because even a little bit of friction helps. Even just turning off your phone. You come home or everybody else comes home if you're working from home, and it's you have a set time on your calendar between whatever 6 and 7. That's going to be when you eat together, and you just turn off your phone for that hour. That's enough of a speed bump that when you pick up your phone addictively, without really noticing you've done it impulsively, you go to check something or swipe and you go, oh, it's off. Oh, yeah, why am I doing that? I want to be free of that. I want to be able to be here for an hour. And you start with an hour a day. I think for a lot of people, an hour a day actually is real progress. They just, without really ever meaning to, have given away an immense amount of control. And just like I did in the hospital story. The hospital story, I want to be clear. I think I'm the enemy of that story. I don't think anybody else is. It's me. Yes, I gave up control drip by drip to something else, to other people. But I'm the one doing that. In the same way as we can with technology, we give up the control. The good news about that is we can take it back. We can take back control. We can get our lives back, and these little trade-offs that really help so much.
When you put it into context of a part-time job, and how many people have that part-time job, if not even a full-time job, it really starts to click, and it can be pretty sobering. Wow. So, what's one lesson, Greg, you find yourself learning over and over?
One lesson I learn over and over is the power of consistency. The real argument, the reason to take the time to design new routines, checklists, reward systems, all of that, the reason you're willing to, as the reading example with the token system illustrates, or the Instagram story, the reason to do it is because what you want is it to be as easy as possible so that you keep doing it for a long period of time. That's the thing. Most of us, through willpower, could say, I'm not checking social media today, right? I'm going to go one day without it, maybe. Some people might struggle with that. But you could, for willpower, you might be able to do it for a little while. But that is of questionable value. If you can only do it once, yeah, sure, it's good. But it's one time you gave up something less important for something hopefully more important. But what you really want is to be able to make that trade-off today and tomorrow and for 1,000 days in the future. And so what you need is to be able to do something small, less grandiose than you may be originally thinking, so that you can do it for a long period of time. I'll give you an example. So for me, journaling is a thing. I find it exceedingly valuable. It's certainly my favorite technology because of what it can and can't do. It's such a distraction-free zone when I'm in a journaling environment, or even just taking notes and so on, just in a paper and pen environment. And so I got to a point where I said, I really would, I'm not keeping a journal every day, but I'd love to do it. And then I heard about somebody that did, and had done it for many years, even though they had tremendous responsibilities. And I thought, well, if they can, I can. And the way they did it is they just did a few sentences per day, just a few sentences. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to have as my upper bound, I'm not going to do more than 5 sentences a day. No less than 1 sentence, no more than 5 sentences. Things that I'm grateful for. That was my list. And the upper bound is hugely important because you want to make the task as simple, as easy as possible, as I've already mentioned, so that you do it tomorrow and that you have reserved energy for 7 days in and 20 days in. And most people, and I think a lot of people listening to this will really relate to this, that they whether it's journaling or something else, but let's stay with journaling as for now. They say, okay, I'm going to take up journaling. They get their journal and they write today. They write an essay for how they're feeling, what's going on and everything. And they're very motivated and they do it once. It takes them an hour or more. And then even almost literally by day 2, it's over. Yeah. Because on day 2, they've got to make up for the hour that they just lost yesterday doing the journaling. And so they can't do it day 2. I don't have time. I'll do it tomorrow. And then day 3, they've got 2 days to make up, and they can't make up 2 hours with that. And so it's over almost before it's begun. And when one of my grandfathers, right before he passed away, I went to his house and got a copy of a journal he'd written in every 2 or 3 days, just a couple of sentences every 2 or 3 days for 50 years. That's really valuable, though, isn't it? I mean, that's something to leave to generations to follow. You actually can share your life. And who can't physically do that? A sentence or 2 every couple of days. And so since I had these insights, these discoveries, this easier way of doing it, I mean, I literally haven't missed a day now. So this has been 8+ years now. And I still have not missed one day in that time. And that's because it's easy. It's not because I'm so great at disciplined. No, I've used my discipline. I've got finite discipline like anywhere else to build a system that's easy. I bring my journal with me almost everywhere I go. I have it in my bag with me. So if I'm on a plane, if I'm anywhere, it's easy to pick out, just write a few sentences. And then, of course, once you start, you tend to write a little more. So it's not just, now it's enough of a habit that I write more often. But if I am crunched for time, I don't mind at all just writing a couple of sentences. I don't feel like, what a failure. I just want to be consistent. And so that's a lesson I keep on learning again and again, is the value of consistency is compounded over time. So the reward gets greater and greater just for being consistent. And so now after just a few years, I have a library shelf full of journals, and I'm just beginning to tap into the value of that. On any day that children can ask me, and I can look up, that same day, the day that they asked me, back year after year after year, what was going on, what we were doing, and it starts to increase our family memory, a sense of who we are, the bigger picture. So there's all these added benefits that come. So it's consistency is an absolutely huge principle that I keep learning again and again.
Oh, it's huge. And that's great that you do go back, and it's your life data, really. I mean, you are recording. Amazing. Well, I appreciate your time, Greg. And just to put this out there for everyone listening, you are working on another book, a new book, but I understand it's top secret. Any hints at all? Is it in a similar realm? I mean, unicorns? Any idea of what you're writing about?
The only thing I will say is that the book begins where essentialism ended. So it will neither be, it won't be a rewrite of essentialism in any way, and it won't be some other universe either. It won't just be changing tracks onto something completely wildly different. And for me, I will say this: the most challenging thing about writing it right now is learning how to do what I'm writing about. It's so at the edge of my own knowledge. I'm very excited. I personally want what this book is about. And so I'm hungry to be learning myself and to be pushing my own understanding, both in research and also in practice, my own life and with other people, to be able to do what I'm writing about. That's all I can say.
Fair enough. That's more than I would have expected, actually. And I'm excited to learn that you are learning it as, we learn what we need to teach often, and you are in the middle of it. So that makes it even more interesting, I feel, for the reader. Thank you for your time today. And just for writing essentialism as well. Like I said, this book I go back to it pretty often and definitely recommend it just to anyone that is serious about how they're spending their time and what's important. And so thank you, and we'll be looking for the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?